Hi again. Welcome back to the Quilty Life with Jenn Burt. Today we are going to tackle part 2 of improv composition. If you missed it, back in episode 10, we did part 1 of this, where we took all the bits and pieces that we made in episodes 1 through 9, and we started the process of making a quilt top out of it. If you've watched that episode, you'll probably recognize these as the 2 blocks that we built in that episode. In this episode, we are going to set these aside, build some more blocks, and then make more decisions after that. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, next up, we've got this trip around the world block that we made, the wonky one. And remember, we want to make it 15 inches by around 15 inches. So we need to add some stuff onto this. Let's look at some bigger stuff that we've got going on here that can help us build things out a little bit faster. So that one's pretty neat looking, I think. What if we go up here and think about the slabs that we made? So we've made our own fabric, and there's a lot of orange going on here, and there's an orange in the middle. So maybe it would be nice to introduce this orange fabric somehow. So let's save that. We also obviously have orange, just solid fabric we could use. We've got some orange stuff here. So let's see, what if we did this? How about we slide that way and put this on this side? That's pretty cool. And then how about if we come in here and we add this orange bit sort of on here, and then do we need something down here in the corner? Maybe the orange goes here because this is kind of busier than this is, and this is a little on the busy side. So we put this here, maybe with an extra strip of orange onto it to get that to, we could cut this in here and fill it out a bit. So let's just lay that there as just a thinking point. We're not locked in on that. And then what do we need to go in this spot here? Let's look in what we've got. I think what I'm going to do is think about these half square triangle blocks that I made. And then I need to decide which way I'm going to orient them. Do I want to go this way to have sort of a big blue blob here in the middle, which I'm not loving, or I could go this way. Yeah, I like that. So here is my starting point. I'm going to start sewing some stuff together, and then I'll make more decisions as I go. I'm going to decide this orange stuff last because I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. It's not quite the right size, so we'll figure out what we're going to do with that later. So I'm going to sew all of those together first. All right, that's good. And let's go ahead and sew this onto that, and then this onto that. Okay, so now this is all sewn together. We're looking at this and we realize there's a pretty big chunk, bigger than we maybe anticipated that we were going to need out here. So what do we want to do? Do we want to add maybe some more stuff in here? Let's look and see what we've got. One thing we could do is we could go back to our strip set that we used in the first bigger block that we built, and we could cut off a chunk of that. So that might look pretty neat, or we could turn it this way. So let's go for something along those lines. Now I have a long strip here, so which part do I like the best? About right there, I think, is about what I'm liking. I'm going to cut into this right here on this pink. I'll save this bit for later, obviously. And then that, yes, I like the way this looks. All right, so now over here, I'm going to cut it. I'll cut it on the purple. Save this bit. Now we do have to keep in mind that we're going to lose this 1/4 of an inch, so I'm trying to keep this a little wider so we don't lose too much and then have to add stuff on. So then down here on the bottom, do we still love this orange? I don't know. I don't know if I love this or not anymore. What if we did this and did the stripes that we just cut off, and then we recycle those into ones that run in the other direction? So I'm really kind of digging this idea. So let's sew these 2 together and sew it onto this and then see where we are there. Okay, and I am loving this. So let's sew this on to this. And there we go. And now we're going to cut straight edges here and sew them together. Something to note, when I sewed these together, the bottom part is sticking out. Now, the one thing that I could do is to press to this, but you can see there's lots of seams there. That's going to cause a lot of bulk. So I really want to press it to this side, but if I just press it like this, I'm probably going to see the shadow of that through on my final quilt. So I could come in here and press all the seams. I could press it all open. So I could come in here, pry this open and press it, but that causes bulk on that side. So what I'm going to do to make sure that doesn't happen is to come in here and trim, and then we've cut off the problem. So now we don't have to worry about anything shadowing through, but we haven't compromised our 1/4 inch seam allowance in any way. And done. So we have gotten it to approximately the size we want. It's still a little short in this way. So we could come in here if we wanted to, maybe add some stripes along the top. So we could do that because that would mirror what's going on here. But I think what I'm going to do is just like I did last time, I'm just going to leave it like this. And then I'm going to see how it goes together with the other two that are already made, plus any other blocks that we make. That will tell us where we need to go from there. Before we move on from this block, let's talk about why I like it. Again, you could be looking at this and think that's horrible and I hate it and I hate how asymmetric it is, and that's totally cool. If you don't like asymmetric stuff like I have going on here, then you can build your stuff improv with total symmetry. So you could have started with this and you could have built out and done everything symmetrical. Do what makes you happy and what pleases you whenever you make it. Now I'm going to be honest, this isn't the sort of thing I would make either, but I think it's really interesting to look at. There's some symmetry going on in a lot of places, and then we have sort of the same overall color scheme going on, and I think this is going to look nice in our overall composition. We've used up all of our larger size blocks, but we want to build another bigger block, so we need to decide what we're going to start with. And I'm sort of looking around at my pile and I'm thinking, what things speak to me? What things do I definitely want to make sure that I include in this quilt? So I'm going to be honest, from the moment I made this little triangle log cabin back in the episode where we did log cabins, it has really just made me happy. And every time I look at it, I think, gosh, I like what's going on with that. So I think this is going to be my starting point. Now, what things do I want to add on to this? This thing, that's quite cool looking. I'll save that. The reason I pulled this one in particular is because it's got this pink in here, and some of our other blocks have a lot of pink going on, and I want to make sure that we introduce some pink and some pastel in here to make sure that we have some cohesiveness going on. But I think before I start adding this on, I'm going to maybe frame this out. So this little guy that has been making me happy sort of stands out on his own. If I start adding a bunch of stuff in here, he might get lost. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull some of my Sally Kelly floral fabrics and sort of make a frame all the way around this and then build out from there. So we'll start with our small bits that we have in the scrap bowl over here and see if any of them are big enough. Well, this one looks like it'll have a big enough chunk to at least cover one of the sides, maybe two. This can maybe work on this side, but none of these other bits are big enough. So we're going to use the larger chunk of fabric from here, but let's start with what we have. Let's cut a piece right here and we'll sew it onto this side. Now we need to be careful about where we put this because remember, this line is going to come out here. So if we don't pull it down far enough, we are not going to be able to cut very far out here. Same thing here. Remember, we go out here. So let's kind of center it so we don't lose too much of this overall. Okay, let's cut that little tip off just to get it out of the way. Remember, I like to use my little seam roller. This is the Clover seam roller. Mine is purple. They're usually blue. Now I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and set that. All right, so let's look. None of these are really going to be big enough, but I see that I could use this piece right here and I'll use up less than this. So I'm going to save this bit for later and I'm going to cut a chunk of this off instead because it's a better use of my fabric. Okay, so we've sewn that on. Now, you'll notice usually when I do log cabins, I go around in either a clockwise or a counterclockwise way, but this time the pieces that we had just sort of forced our hand and we had to put them on the two short sides. So let's go ahead and clean this up right here and get ourselves a straight edge. And I'm going to do this with a ruler in this case, but remember, you can always do things with or without a ruler. There are no rules. There we go. And now we've got our triangle back into a triangular type shape. So now we want to come back in here with our piece of yardage and look and see what we need to do. So we can see right here that this is plenty long enough for this side. Now, why wasn't it big enough for this side? Let's look at this. When we come out here, along here, we're going to have a little skinny piece, right? It's not going to give us very much. And over here, we would have plenty here, but this is selvage, so we got to cut that off. This side is different because the angles are different. So we would come out here, we can come out pretty far, and the angle here comes in. So let's scooch it this way. So when we cut this off, we would come here, and then we could come really far out here. So let's cut sort of a big strip of this. So we have a lot to work with. We can cut it down if we need to. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this selvage off over here on the side. And so I'm going to put it right there and sew it on 1/4 of an inch along that side. And there. I really love that. Okay, so we're going to have to add something along this side. So let's do the normal thing and clean it up. And now we want to add a piece onto here. But before we do that, because maybe this is too fat and this is getting a little bit out of hand, right? So let's decide if we want to cut this down a bit. And I think I do. I don't want it quite this wide. So I'm just going to come in here and cut it about like that. Now let's see if I like that. Is it still too fat? No, I like that. So this makes me happy. So now I've got to find a piece that'll fit along this side. Let's pull out the yardage again and let's take a peek. So the same trouble that we had last time, and now it's even worse because we've added on a piece. So that's okay because we've got a really long skinny piece of this fabric. So we'll just turn it around this way. So we want to come out to here and then out to about here. All right, so I'm going to keep my finger right here and then I'm going to cut up from there and then I'm going to sort of peel that down. And now coming in from this side, I'm going to cut across and that helps me just eyeball what I was shooting for. And now we decide where we're going to put it on here. Keep in mind, we want it to come out to here. This is going to come here. So that's going to hit about the same place. So I think this is about right. So we will sew it on right there. And yay, that looks pretty cool. So let's clean this up and let's make this side a little bit skinnier so it doesn't overwhelm this middle piece here. And here's what I have so far. So now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I trimmed these down, but I still think they're a bit too fat. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to cut even more of this floral off of each side. Okay, so I trimmed all that off and I am feeling a lot better about this. The scale of things feels better. I just like it. So now we need to decide what we're going to do next. So let's revisit some of these pieces out here. I really feel like we need to pull some pink in somehow. And there's not too many pieces left over here that have pink in them. So maybe we ignore that for now. We do have this. Let's find us some more pieces that have some pink. This one has some darker pink. Oh yeah, we do have our slab of pink fabric that we made. And then of course, we have the stripe fabric that we made that has some pink in it. So that could be really cool. But remember that we want to keep the blocks to be 15 by 15 inches, right? So one thing we could do is look and see what's going on here. And this is right at 15 inches across. So maybe this becomes the bottom of our block and then we build onto the top of it. So we started out thinking maybe this was going to be the middle, but maybe because of the way we built it, it becomes the bottom. So let's think about it that way. What happens if we add this onto the side here? That might look kind of cool. And what if we take this pink fabric and add it up along here? So what's that going to look like when we cut it down? Because obviously we're not going to use this whole chunk of pink. Do we like what's going on? Honestly, I really just don't like this with this. And this is just not speaking to me. I like this fabric, but I don't like it with this. So I'm going to set this aside and not use it in this block. So I really want to get some pink in here. So let's think about pulling something from our scraps. So there is some pink here. So we do have these that have pink. We have some pink scrap. Let's see, what other pink do we have in here? There's some pink, here's some pink, and here's some purple. I didn't think about purple to start with, but that would get us in the right pastel-y kind of family we might like. So let's see what happens with that. So I think I'm going to just set this one aside too, because I don't like the way the triangles are working with these triangles. So I'm going to set this aside. We might end up using it, but not now. What about these? Same sort of idea. I like the colors, but I don't like how everything's interacting. So we'll set those aside for now. Let's think about these pinks and purples here. We've got this purple. And remember, we're going to come and cut this in. So this is close to the right size here. Let's just go for it. Let's just sew this one on and see where it takes us. Okay, I really like that. And now let's try to think about what's going to go on here. Now remember, that's going to come here. So we need a piece that'll fit into this space here. So we don't have one piece that'll go all the way across. But what if we sewed together this and that? And then do we have any more small pieces? Maybe we pull a different color. We don't have to go all pink. How about the orange? Yes. So let's go with this orange. So we'll flip this onto this and sew it together, and then we'll come back and sew that side on too. There we go. That looks quite nice. What if we flip this around this way? Flip this around this way, and then maybe add a little piece of purple here to the side. That might be interesting. So I'm going to do that before I sew this on. I'm going to sew this little bit onto this and make our strip a little longer. There we go. I really like that. Let's cut a straight edge and then sew this onto that. I really love it. So let's remember, we're trying to keep this in the 15 by 15 range. So I'm just going to cut up here and around here, just because this is where the point is, really. It gave us that little jib of purple out here that'll bring in over here. And we lose that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. It'll even be cuter. It'll be a cute little purple triangle over there. Okay, so what are we going to do now? We need to keep building up. Let's cut this off and think about what we could add here. Now, maybe at this point, we can start introducing these things back in. Now, this is making me happier now because this triangle isn't so close to this, and it feels a little less weird. Well, maybe it needs to go this way. Yeah, I like it this way because if we cut this off right here, we have this triangle sort of doing this. We have some pushing and pulling going on, and I kind of like that idea. This is really close to the right size, so that's another reason I really like this. So let's just go ahead and make the decision and sew this bad boy on. There we go. I really like that. Let's go in here and notice this was a little bit short. So let's go ahead and just clean that up so we know where our line is here. That helps us make better decisions down the road if we know where we're going to have to cut off anyway. So I'm really leaning towards now bringing in some of those stripes again. So let's look and see if we were to let's put this on top. Actually, let's trim this down straight so we have a better idea. Okay, so now if I lay this on here, what do we think? Kind of like that. Let's flip it around the other way. And so maybe I like this better because over here it felt like it was trying to match up but hadn't. So I think maybe this way I like a little better. We need this black to be a lot bigger than it is. It needs to go all the way up to about here. Let's just cut an edge, sew it on, and not make a decision until later. So let's cut a straight edge here. This orange and this blue are the shortest ones. So we will cut in line with those to lose the least amount of pieced fabric. And these stripes, I've handled them a lot and they've gotten kind of weird. So I'm going to go ahead and press them first just to make sure everything's nice and flat. I'll do that and then come back to discuss one more thing. All right, these are much flatter now and we won't have to worry about when we sew them on anything getting puckered or anything like that. Now what I want you to notice is this is going to be too small. So we're short on either one side or the other. So what I'm going to think about doing is sewing on a strip to one side or the other. And I think I'll sew it to this side. So let's come up with a strip of fabric from our stash. And I've got this long piece of yellow here, which I think will work really nicely. So I'm just going to go with that one. All right, that's sewn on. And now I'm just going to cut that off. And now it is a little bit bigger than this on each side, which makes me happy, and we know we're not going to be short on fabric. So I'm just going to flip this onto here, and then I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch along there. So why am I pressing this way and not this way? Because these are the dark ones, so you would think, oh, I'll do it that way, but there's a lot of seams here, and if you flip it this way, you end up with a lot of bulk. So here, you got a lot less of that going on, so pushing to this side makes everything lay much, much flatter. And there we go. I am really loving the way that this looks. We have around 15 inches wide. We're getting taller. Let's go ahead and cut in here so we can make some decisions about what to do on this side. And there we go. All right, that is now cut off. And now we are looking pretty good. We're the right width, and we are clearly now tall enough. So maybe we're also going to cut some of this off across the top. So let's do that as well. So here's 30. So 15 is around here. Let's just go a little bit bigger than 15. That's looking pretty good. Now we can fill in here. My first inclination is just to drop this in here because that's actually going to look pretty cool, I think. So I think I'm going to do that. This is going to have to be cut off straight too. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have this, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to cut up here and there. So I think this is going to leave us enough here. I think this is going to work for us. All right, and there we go. And now we press the seam allowance to this side. What I want you to notice right here, I made that decision to push this to this side, but this is getting quite weird here. There's this big point here, and I have to decide, would it actually be better to flip it the other way? So I'm going to test it. So let's flip it around the other way and see what happens. And that's got way too much bulk. I can just feel it. It's just fat right there. So we go back to the original idea of doing it this way, but we think, okay, well, maybe we're going to have to cut some of this off because the bulk is mostly right here at this point. That's where it's really fat. So let's just go ahead and press this, and then we can see, we put the tailor's clapper on there. We'll see if we can flatten it out, but this is going to feel lumpy, and we might want to get rid of that. So first I'm going to press it with my little clover seam roller. Then I'm going to take it to the ironing board, iron it, and lay a tailor's clapper on it for 30 seconds to see if I can get it flatter. All right, and that did get a good bit flatter, but I'm still not happy with that. So I think what we're going to do, if you recall, we had cut this bigger than 15 inches. So I think what I'm going to do is just cut the problem off. The problem doesn't start until about right there. So if we cut it off right here, then that weird bulkiness doesn't hurt anything. And ta-da! Problem solved. Now let's cut off on this side. And there we go. So look at that. Isn't that the prettiest block? I think this is the best one we've made so far. And I really like how it sort of looks like herringbone almost, the way we built it. But then it's got all kinds of directionality. It's pointing you in, it's pointing you out. I really love this one. So you might have been watching the clock tick down and you're thinking, Jen, you are not going to finish this quilt by the end of part 2. And you would be right. I have already finished filming the whole thing, but it's going to be too long to put all of this stuff in part 2. So I am going to make a part 3 where I take the 4 build bigger blocks that I made and put them together into one big quilt top for you. You know what you got to do. You got to tune in next time for another episode of The Quilty Life with me, Jenn George Burt.